I will revert to English now because I want to welcome our next panel on paternity leaves and parental leaves in general. We will have with us Julian Jonsen, who is an associate professor of economics at the University of Bergen and has very interesting research to share with us. We will also have Thalia Vuvonikou, who's the head of human resources for Greece and Cyprus at Henkel Hellas. Welcome, Thalia. And also Dimitris Platis, whose title I only have in Greek, so I will say he's a deputy supervisor at the General Secretariat for Demography and Gender, Family Policy, Demography and Gender Equality, and the coordinator for the SHARE project, about which you will hear more in a minute. So, Julian, welcome. We thought that we should start with you so that you can lay the ground with some information from your research around paternity leave, its economic impact, and the ways which we can promote promote the use of paternity leave and parental leave in companies and organizations in the private sector.
Thank you very much. So is it okay if I share my screen?
Sure.
Let's see. Thanks.
Yes, we can see your presentation. Great.
That's great. So as you said, I'm a professor in economics at the University of Bergen, and I work on labor market issues, men and women's careers, and how public policies such as paternity leave affect those career paths. So I think it's a very interesting conference you're having today, so thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you.
And I think I'll start by just laying the ground for why do we think family policies are important for addressing gender inequality. And the main reason is, of course, that if we look at the data in different countries, both in the south and north of Europe, we find that parenthood is the main driver of the gender gaps that we see in the labor market. And this is what we call the family gap. So the earnings difference between men and women with children is much larger than the earnings difference between men and women without children. So just to illustrate that, we'll look at some evidence from Denmark from another paper. So in this paper, they're looking at the earnings path of men and women just before they have their kids and then after they have their kids. And then they normalize it such that the difference is relative to the year just before they have kids. And what you see in this data is that for men, the career path is relatively stable. They follow the general age trajectory in terms of earnings. But for women, when they have their first child, there's a large drop in their earnings, and they never fully recover and then come back to the level at which the men's earnings growth is happening. And you can see that also by looking just at women with and without children, and then you see that once women have children, then there's a large negative impact in terms of their earnings growth compared to those who do not have kids. While if you look at men, there's not a similar pattern. So parenthood really is the main driver of the gender gaps that we see in the labor market. And that is both for earnings, as we've seen here, but also for getting promotions to manager and so forth and so forth.
Julian, if I may interrupt you so that I can make it clear, this is about women and men who take advantage of parental leave policies or not?
So this is this evidence is from Denmark, so which means that parental leave policies is available to all women. So in women, they don't have the parental leave policy, but they have a parental leave policy. So mainly women go on parental leave in Denmark, not men.
Thank you.
But what we can see if we look at evidence from more countries, we see that even in countries, this is not just related to going on parental leave, so it's just related to having a child, and then we see that there's a big difference coming afterwards. So we can see that the gap in Denmark is slightly smaller than the gap that happens in the United States, which famously is the OECD country which has no paid parental leave whatsoever at the government level. So in all the countries that researchers have looked at this, the pattern is the same. So even without parental leave policies in place, there is this gap after men and women have kids in terms of their earnings growth. So the question is then if Nordic family policies as a package, or if particular Nordic policies could be one of the solutions to this issue, that if we want to address the gender inequality in the labor market, So I'm going to talk about paternity leave in particular, but let me just talk briefly about the Nordic policies in total. So the Nordic family policies have several aims from the politicians' side. So one of the first and main aims is that they want to make it possible for women to reconcile work and family life. So they want to make it possible to combine both work and family and having a career. So this means that it is meant to improve gender equality in the workplace, both in terms of more women being employed, that women have the same career path in terms of earnings and job opportunities as men. But it also means that it's meant to enable workers to have kids. So it's also meant to increase the fertility among women who are also working. And then the second main aim of the policies is to promote child welfare and development. So what I'm going to talk about mostly today is going to be about how this paternity leave policy can help improve gender equality in the workplace. But remember these other important aims of the policies too. And the main policies that we have in the Nordic countries and Norway is mainly childcare. So we have very high rates of subsidized preschool childcare. So everyone from the age of 1 can have a heavily subsidized childcare slot for their kids. And also it's a parental leave. So we have a very long parental leave in Norway, and it's highly subsidized in terms of it's a high earnings replacement rate. So if you can go on almost 1 year of leave and have 100% of your earnings replaced. And then within this parental leave policies, we also have the paternity leave policies, which is what I'm going to talk about in the next couple of slides. So in terms of the theoretical effects, what do we expect the paternity leave policy to have an impact in the labor market? So a paternity leave policy is a quota, which means that part of the parental leave period is going to be reserved for the father of the child. And in addition to this paternity leave quotas that we have in Norway and also in Denmark and Iceland, we have a very long and generous parental leave for women. So we have one of the longest parental leaves for women in Norway, around a year, and they have an even longer one in Sweden. And some researchers have argued that this long and generous parental leave in the Nordic countries, while it helps to bring women into the labor market and enable them to combine work and family, it might also create some issues at the very top of the labor market. So if employers are afraid that women go on very long parental leaves, there is an issue that they might discriminate against women in terms of hirings and promotions. So that's been a fear in the research community, and there are some papers indicating that when we have women going on long parental leaves and men not going on leaves, that's going to create discrimination in the labor market, because employers are afraid that workers might be absent for a long period, and then they might not want to hire women who they expect might have a child. And they might not want to promote a woman who they expect to have a child in the period, in the next period. And if you look at the Nordic countries, so while we do pretty good in terms of gender inequality, we have very low inequality in terms of female employment and the gender gap in earnings. But where the Nordic countries do relatively poorly is in terms of the share of women among senior managers and officials. So that's the remaining gender gaps in the Nordic countries is at the very top of the labor market. And some have argued that this long and generous parental leave for women is one of the reasons why that is the case. And the theoretical effect of this paternity leave is, of course, to shift some of the burden, as we might call it. Of course, it's a pleasure to raise kids and be with kids, but in terms of careers, we could call it a burden. So the paternity leave partly shifts this burden of leave from the mothers to the fathers, by making the men taking a longer period of the parental leave, such that the employers know that also men will be away for some periods. It's not only women that are going to be away for a period after having kids. So that could have an effect in terms of diminishing the discrimination against women in the labor market, but it could also potentially lead to worse career outcomes for leave-taking fathers. So let me talk a bit more about the particular paternity leave policy that we have in place in Norway, which was meant to enhance gender equality. That was the stated aim of the politicians who introduced the paternity leave quota in Norway. But before I talk about that, let me just briefly say something about research methodology. So we work with statistics and different statistical models in terms of looking at what is the effect of a given policy. And what everyone can observe is, of course, that in the Nordic countries, we have generous family policies, we have paternity leave programs, and we also have high gender equality in the labor market. But that doesn't prove that it's the paternity leave or the generous family policies that is the main driver of the gender equality that we see in the labor market. There could be all of these other factors, such as gender norms, which is the main cause behind both the gender equality that we see in the labor market, but also this demand for policies such as paternity leave or such as childcare policies. So we should be very careful in terms of interpreting these correlations that we see, that the Nordic countries have both paternity leave and also gender equality, and then think immediately that the paternity leave policy is the cause of the gender equality. We cannot easily say that. So any observed correlation that we observe could be driven by all of these unobserved factors, such as gender norms. And the solutions that we as researchers try to look for is what we call natural experiments. So if we want to look at the effect of a vaccine on COVID outcomes, then we have a treatment group and a control group, and we randomize who gets the vaccine and who doesn't get the vaccine. And what we're as social scientists looking at is we want to find something naturally occurring because of a reform or a policy or a change, which creates this control group. So we want to look at a group which gets the paternity leave, and then a comparison group which does not get the paternity leave. And hopefully those two groups will be very similar, and then we can tease out the effect of the paternity leave quota on gender equality. And that's what I'm going to talk more about now. So let's talk a bit about the specifics of the Norwegian paternity leave program. So Norway was the first country in the world to introduce a paternity leave quota. So on April 1st, 1993, those who had a child born on that date or later, the father of that child would be eligible for 4 weeks of paternity leave. So that would be on top of 35 weeks for the mother. We introduced these 4 weeks for the father. So if you had the child just before that date, on the 31st of March, you would have no paternity leave. But if you have the child just after, you would have these 4 weeks of paternity leave. And then in the next, 10 years later, there was a push for more paternity leave, longer paternity leave period. So it was gradually increased to 14 weeks in 2005 to 13, then reduced again to 10 weeks by the Conservative government in 2014, and then increased again to 15 weeks in 2015, which is at currently. So it was introduced in the 90s, but during the 2000s and 2010s, it's been growing to represent almost a third of the total parental leave length. And what has been mainly studied, and what we're going to see that we're also using, is the introduction of the paternity leave quota. And one very important aspect of this program in terms of the take-up of the program is that it's use it or lose it. Those 4 weeks cannot be transferred to the mother. So the whole parental leave period can be shared in whichever way the mother and father prefers. But these 4 weeks of paternity leave cannot be transferred to the father, from the father to the mother. So if the father decides not to go on parental leave, the mother cannot use those weeks. And that was very effective in actually inducing men to go on parental leave. So this is a figure from our research paper. So this is just looking at how many men actually go on parental leave before and after the paternity leave quota. So the x-axis here is centered on 0, which is April 1st, 1993. And then we look at how many men went on parental leave based on the child's month of birth. And we see that before the reform, only around 3% of men in Norway actually went on parental leave, took any parental leave at all, 1 week or 1 day. But when they introduced the paternity leave quota, it had an immediate effect on men actually going on parental leave. So from the first month of parental leave program, then 50% of men are actually going on parental leave. So it goes from 3% to 50%. So the program had a large and immediate effect on men actually staying at home with the kids when they had these paternity leave quotas. And then what we're going to be comparing in these different studies which has looked at the effect of the paternity leave program on men and women's outcomes is we're going to compare those who had the child just before the introduction of the reform, with a low take-up, and those who had the child just after the introduction of the reform. And the idea is that then we're back into this setting with almost like a vaccine program with the treatment and a control group, because if you have a child in late March or early April, most likely you're going to be very similar in terms of all the other characteristics of those people. So we have a good treatment and a control group, which makes it a good setting to look at the effect of the paternity leave program.
Julian, we have another 2 minutes for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the heads up. So let me summarize briefly what the people have found that the paternity leave quota did. So the previous work has focused on what it did within the family. So it found that fathers did more housework in the family, but it didn't find any effect on the earnings of the mothers. And in addition, it also found some evidence that if you knew someone who went on parental leave, you're more likely to go on paternity leave as a new father yourself. So there was this peer effect that if you observed other men going on parental leave, you became more likely to go on parental leave. So there was this snowball effect that over time, more and more men went on parental leave. Still around 10% of eligible men do not take leave, and that's especially among managers and men working in the financial sector. And we're trying to looking at both why didn't all men take it when it was introduced, and why are some men still reluctant to go on parental leave? And we think that the main explanation of why that is occurring is that there are these competition effects within the workplace. So a lot of employees, do not go on these parental leaves because they fear that they might harm their careers if they actually choose to go on parental leave. And there's a lot of different economic theories about why the relative status of workers matters a lot for their career advancement. So we're looking at whether or not these concerns are justified. So are there these competition effects of parental leave within the workplace? And what we're going to do is that we're going to look at fathers who were themselves eligible for going on parental leave, and then looking at among the men who worked in the same office as them in the workplace, how many of those men were also eligible for going on parental leave? And what we see is that if we compare two people who are both eligible for parental leave, but they differ in terms of how many of their close competitors at the workplace are eligible for going on parental leave, we see that those who had a larger share of co-workers who also went on parental leave, though they do better in the long-run career growth. So if we're looking at the effect of you going on parental leave on your own earnings, that's completely driven by this competition effect among co-workers. So the more of your co-workers are going on parental leave, the better you do, which hints at this competition effect at the workplace. So let me conclude by just saying that when a father has more of his competitors taking paternity leave because of this new policy, you enjoy this better post-child earnings trajectory.
So thank you so much. This was so interesting and such a great foundation for our questions and our discussion later. Thank you so much. I will give the floor to Thalia, who's going to talk about how all this can be implemented in the private sector, in the workplace.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Today is a very interesting day for us.
You can have your microphone as well.
Okay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about paternity leaves, and especially the case of our company, Henkel. For us, diversity and inclusion issues in any way are top of the agenda and a strategic priority for the company worldwide. So today's agenda is to examine our plan activation, the actions that we took, especially for the paternity leaves case, internal and external communication boost, our consideration and the way to go as we see the issue, some positive signs that we see from the markets, and of course some future trends and future targets that we are going to focus on. So paternity leaves, for us, very, very important to support the active father model, as we say it. So we have a community of diversity and inclusion ambassadors across the countries. where we speak about a lot of issues about gender, about any other aspect of diversity, and of course, families are among those conversations. So we focus on increase the use of paternity leave among the countries, apart and above from the legal minimum of each country. We send reminder emails for the paternity leave right to all our employees, which we feel that we boost this way the communication and the acceptance from the company about their rights. We have a parental guide per country where we explain the legal minimum and what the flexibility measures as a country, as a company we can take and we can absorb for them to feel comfortable about their parental rights and their parental ways, their families and their needs of their homes. We have a special family day at the office in many countries of Henkel where we invite them with their families to come and spend time in the office. This way we show them that we truly evaluate and we truly believe in their family importance and how we do appreciate the fact that they have these dual roles, which is not very easy. And of course we have special internal communities of fathers and mothers, where the hat of the father or the mother, not the hat of with a specific title. Everybody is equal in the community, and they talk about their worries and their difficulties while raising their children and being also in a large organization with a lot of other targets as well, business targets. We also focus on several analysis and exchange. We analysis between the countries. We exchange best practices among us. And we have a special guide of return to work policies where we try to be as flexible as we can when a father or a mother return to work after a parental leave. The training is also very important for us concerning these issues. A Master Mama and Plus platform started from Italy. Still we're trying to have this platform in other countries as well. It is a platform and training platform where all the parents, mothers and fathers can enter and take advices of simple advices, daily advices of how they can raise their children, and this of course was welcomed also for the new fathers and mothers in the organization. We have specially learning programs dedicated to families, and of course the focus is work-life balance because we know how hectic can be, how challenging can be for someone to have also a family and have a role in an organization. So stress techniques and other techniques are focused in our platform. Internal communication is also very important for us. We celebrate Father's Day, we send reminder cards, special gifts, we have videos and testimonials from Henkel in order to ongoing support the father role. We have internal portal articles, and of course the visuals and the material are very important for us to give the active role of the father with images and photos. Our external communication is quite intense, especially the last 3 years, where the diversity and inclusion focus of Henkel has been emphasized in many forums, in special editions and articles, with social media, and the presence in very successful conferences related to inclusion, to inclusive practices, and of course equality practices. Way to go. We think that we have a lot of way to go, to run. We have an embedded culture which is not so much supportive, especially in Southern European countries, meaning that we tend to bind success of the male, of the men, related mostly to work-related success and not so much to a successful family man. We have still the father of the weekend trend, where the father ends up 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening at home and of course being with the children only during the weekend. And we know that we have a lot of social pressure on the mothers where they're supposed to be closer or more often with their children instead of making a career or worrying about their successes in the office. So we feel that we still have a long way to go, especially if we see the numbers of the use of paternity leave, especially in the Southern European countries, are very low or very limited in comparison to the one taken from the mothers. But we know that the change is inevitable. We have some positive signs. We know that the new generation shows us the path. We see that the younger parents, the younger fathers are closer to their family. They are more active in their daily routines. They support more the mothers. We see more and more younger fathers being close to their children. Of course, work-life balance and well-being focus for most private and public organizations is a focus, and a lot of research is there around it. A culture of equal opportunities is on the table of the discussion. Everybody speaks about it, and there are a lot of opportunities to discuss, exchange, and of course improve our actions. We have also supportive framework, as we see from European and Greek law changes. So law and the states of Europe generally are supporting paternity and parental leaves in general. And of course, we have the positive signs on gender equality in the markets, in some markets where we see that more and more the growing of women in more strong position is there. The agenda for us is quite challenging. We want to embed the no guilt culture, as we say it. So for all people at all levels, all parents, mother and fathers, irrespective if they are managers or not to feel any guilt or any doubt of taking and making use of their rights. We examine the new trends, we have case studies, and we want to full align with the new successful module, the new era that is coming to us, and we see that we cannot stop and we don't want to stop. We want to proceed to align our practice and our policies and give the opportunity, equal opportunities for work-life balance to all our employees. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Thalia. I have so many questions, and I hope we'll have the time to pose most of them. Dimitris. There you go. Stella. Let's hear from you about the gender equality label for Greece and the importance that it puts on parental leave and paternity leave policies.
Yes. Hello, and thanks for the invitation for the General Secretariat for Demography, Family Policy and Gender Equality. I would like to start with work-life balance, which as a concept was mainly introduced in the 90s in the European Union and consequently in Greece. The main reason of and the main logic of these policies was to deal with the fact that women had to leave labor market, work part-time or in less demanding jobs due to care responsibilities. Also, the employers seem negatively biased against women for current or future family and care responsibilities. These responsibilities of women is the main, let's say, parameter of the gender employment gap, the gender pay gap, and the gender pension gap. Women face high poverty, much higher poverty risk, especially the elderly women, social exclusion, have less free time for self-development and leisure activities, and they are less independent economically, which has very serious implications for other factors of their life and their rights to live and enjoy fully their lives. So the first years, work-life balance measures were aimed mainly at women, But apparently this was not effective because we saw that women worked more, but also had to work at home more. We have a statistic, we say, this is at EU level, this statistic, that between men and women with a child under the age of 7, working women spend 39 hours per week in unpaid work and 32 hours in paid work, and men 19 hours and 41 hours respectively. So if you sum it up, you see how less free time women have. A shift of policy was needed, and the concept of work-life balance should concern both men and women. This should aim at tackling the traditional stereotypes regarding the gender roles and sharing of responsibilities within the household. And this would also educate and empower both the individuals, and this would also educate the companies as well. So this shift of policy is shown in different documents and policies at the EU level, with initiative on work-life balance of 2017, the strategic engagement for gender equality, and the EU work-life balance directive in 2019. So, we have now, let's say, a good legislative framework of parental leaves and carers for both parents, paternity leaves, flexible working arrangement for workers who are parents, fathers or mothers. But as I think Julian said, the take-up is still low, especially for men, because first, they are discouraged by the employer, and second, they are afraid that this will have repercussions for their career and financial, let's say, draws.
So, Dimitri,
so not all working men and women take up the leaves and arrangements they are entitled to.
Can we make this distinction? Because Julian mentioned that the salaries in Norway are kept at a level of about 90% during the leave. Mm-hmm. So what's the rate, the percentage in Greece?
We don't have a number for that. We have the number that the take-up percentage of men was about 10%.
But their pay is not guaranteed. Their salary is not guaranteed over these.
Depends on the.
Okay.
Or if you're working at the public sector, mm-hmm. Or the private sector, in your position, or your salary, your regular salary. If you have, I mean, some companies will cover
100%
the difference
of the
between
salary,
what
yeah.
OIF gives you and what your area salary is. So it depends.
Yeah. Sorry,
but it might vary to a very significant mm-hmm. level, this reduction of your income.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to clarify.
Problem. So we also need to address the behaviors of men and women who their superiors, their colleagues, their employers, their companies, concerning the combination of work and private care, and the attitudes towards certain working patterns by men and women. And we have to highlight company behavior because it is key. And we need to persuade the companies that addressing work-life balance is a strength, because it helps to attract good workers, increase motivation, and reduce stress, mental health issues, and all the reasons that sometimes cause the early exit from labor market. Women, and especially men, should feel more comfortable in taking up leave arrangements, which in combination with the use of care facilities leads to a more equal share of care at household level. This, all the above, was the main idea, where the main idea when we designed and when we implemented the shared gender equality label, along with KEFI and to Women on Top. The shared gender equality label is part of the project SHARE, promoting work-life balance in companies and a better sharing of care between men and women. It's a co-funded program by the Rights, Equality and Citizenship Program of the European Commission. It had various actions, and let's say the core of this program, it was the gender equality label to businesses. It included the development of methodology for the evaluation of businesses and the awarding of label or not, the development of educational material on gender equality and work-life balance issues, and seminars for participating companies. Mm-hmm. Some main feature was that it established an independent evaluation committee. We made a clear distinction between small and medium and large companies because they have different needs and they have different, let's say, restrictions, either budgetary or administrative. The evaluation criteria were grouped into 4 main categories, and these were the equal treatment, equality in decision-making, work-life balance, and corporate culture. Enterprises had to fulfill a minimum acceptable score per category of criteria, and this minimum acceptable score was much lower for smaller enterprises. The core of the methodology criteria was Group C, work-life balance, parental leaves and carers leaves for both parents, paternity leaves, flexible working for parents or carers, and care facilities. We have, as you know, we're still working on it, and we are almost concluding it. Last week, the 18 businesses that were awarded with the shared gender equality label were announced. Out of 32 businesses that participated in the program, and the 22 that finally submitted an evaluation file. And we hope that we will have a new gender equality label to be announced during the year.
And we should say we have representatives from at least 2 companies who were awarded the gender equality label this year with us today.
Everyone is welcome.
Great. This was your last slide?
Yes.
Oh, great. So let me start with the question that I have for Julian. And of course, if anyone from our audience has questions as well, you can pose them to our speakers. So Julian, we all understand coming from the private sector mainly that there are very tangible challenges for companies and organizations wanting to implement parental leave policies. And this may have to do with budgetary issues, have to do with continuation, of quality. And so what's the incentive for the companies to try and work around these issues and, find ways to approach them in novel ways? What's the economic incentive there?
So I think that those are really important questions. And as an economist, you'd always think that our main theories suggest that a company would do what maximizes the profits of the company. So if they know that parental leave is good for the company, then they would promote parental leave. So I think if we can find evidence that promoting parental leave among your workers is good for the company, we should definitely spread that information wide as possible. And apart from that, I think also that sometimes the freedom of choice, if many companies speak about making the work-life balance work, but they don't really walk the walk in the long run. And part of the problem could be this very big freedom of choice for workers. They say that we provide some parental leave, you can go on parental leave if you'd like, and we encourage that. But if no one else is kind of doing that or going by example, and you're setting it as a rule that you have to go on parental leave, then people might be afraid that actually going on leave would hurt their career. So there's this example from the US. There was a large company which wanted to promote general leave, that people should do more leave taking to promote their well-being. So they said, no longer we have 2 weeks of holiday each year. You can have as many days you like. You just have to get your work done. And what happened is, of course, that the workers took less leave because they were afraid that when they were gone, other people would not take leave and then get all the good projects and tasks. So I think it's very important that you set specific rules that people should follow, and then the leaders should lead by example, like Mark Zuckerberg, who took parental leave at Facebook, right? That then the workers need to be clear that there is a firm policy that everyone follows, and also the executives. I think that would be an important starting point.
That's really important, I think, what you said about the a very specific framework. And Thalia talked a lot about communication, especially internal communication. So you talked about reminders, you talked about information leaflets for fathers and parents. Apart from that, apart from the policy part and the communication part, what about the issue of say, role models within the company? Because Julian talked about the competition effect. So what's your experience from role modeling around parental leave? Is it important for leaders to give the example?
Yeah, thank you for the question, especially for that.
I think you should be your mic.
Thank you for the question. Especially for that, we have a role model database, as we say it, which is, okay, it comes from role models from all other sectors for diversity and inclusion, not only paternity and maternity leave. But for us, role models are very important because we saw that from other countries, let's say in Greece or in Italy, in Southern European countries, where the use of paternity leave is not so much extending, even in our case, and I think it's also at the country level, we see that the role model speak out, the special testimonial and video helps a lot to put out the guilt out of it. So we have a lot of employees, a lot of colleagues that are working in other European countries where they share our experience with us. And actually we have senior managers and senior leaders making use of this benefit of paternity leave and how positive they came out of it, and how this helped also in employee engagement, in employee satisfaction. And we think that this is where we stand. If we listen to them and we see that not even it was an obstacle for the productivity, but actually it was increased productivity. Yeah. This is where we can go forward. So for us, the role model from those countries are very important, and we think that in this way we will proceed forward also in our countries.
I have a follow-up question for you. What about the policies and the measures you have put in place in order to ensure this continuity we talked about, the level of quality that you need to ensure for your products and services when people come and go, when it's not just women anymore, it's also men. So how do you make up for that?
We have ongoing procedures and processes and policies. We do have walk the talk. We have days. We have a lot of policies that, communication is endless. You cannot go in and go out just like that, or just to let's say celebrate diversity one day and then stop. So we make up for it for being conscious and having continuous communication. Never stop to communicate the messages to the employees. The diversity and inclusion community is active, so it's active also to the new employees. So the messages are across the company, and the networks and the people that are there in order to answer questions are always there. What we can do is to never stop talking about it, never stop reminding that never stop having these values inside us, and be something like a characteristic of us, like an internal cell of our company. So everybody knows, entering the company, what are our values and what we stand for.
So important. Dimitris, imagine that a small, and this is a question from our chat, imagine that a small or medium company has the same values and want to promote diversity and inclusion and equality in the workplace and promote parental leave policies, but they face much bigger challenges because of their size. So how would you go about supporting these companies implement those parental leaves policies and measures? These small and medium enterprises.
You mean in the context of the label, of the gender equality label?
I mean, in general, what is it that could help those small and medium companies implement these kinds of measures and policies that may seem hard for a much larger company? So imagine how much harder they should be for a company of 10 or 15 or 20 people. Who may become parents at the same time. Not all of them, but 2 or 3 of them. It's 30% of their company leaving.
Well, to be honest, this is of a much broader scope than that we have as a general secretariat. It affects and concerns a lot of ministries and the Greek state as a whole. And I agree that it's much more difficult for a small or a very small company to have the same programming, let's say, flexibility. They can't have the staff to cover or to make shifts. So they have to be, from our scope, the criteria, as they said, and was much more softer, and the demands were lower. We can't make a small company. We can't make them have care facilities, let's say, or a breastfeeding room or a playing corner. We could, however, subsidize some of these services. There are solutions. I think that some policies need to be need some, let's say, I don't know how to say it in English, but
you mean adaptation to?
I think that the society as a whole and the state as a whole needs to be sure and be certain that work-life balance policy is necessary. It's not a cost. It is an investment.
Okay.
I'm not sure we are still at this point. Maybe some bigger companies that are also multinational companies have the know-how and have the confidence to do so, but as a whole, we don't have it in Greece.
This gives me a great pass for Julian, because it was something that Thalia mentioned before, that we equate success mainly for fathers with success in the workplace. So, Julian, do you have anything to share about how do we talk more about the care economy and the value of care in our societies and our workplaces and ecosystems? Because I have the feeling that if we don't do that, if we continue to equate success with job success, then it will be much harder for men to take up that role, that caring role.
I think that's completely right. I think it's besides most of the research that I do, but if I want to relate it a bit back to what you were talking about earlier, I think some larger companies do find that they themselves can profit from having more work-life balance and promoting paternity leave policies and other policies, and therefore they push them. But a lot of the smaller firms will be hesitant because they know that it might hurt them in the market competition as well. So of course what happened in Norway was not that the firms themselves introduced these policies, but that the state introduced these policies. And that's because the society as a whole agreed on electing political parties which then pushed these reforms, right? So there was a gender norm in the Norwegian society which demanded this kind of policies for a better work-life balance and for a better or more equal sharing of the parental leave benefits. So I think that's if you want to get all the small firms aboard, it's really important that the society as a whole, through government subsidies and interventions, push these policies. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to solve the issues of all of the small firms opting out of these policies, because they're afraid that if one out of 10 co-workers is on leave on a given period, they might miss out on an important project or so forth. So I think we need this society as a whole pushing this through the government policies.
Thank you so much. I will get back to policy in a minute. Thalia, was it easy? Is it easy to plan for so many people taking parental leave? Because imagine if we have, say, a large company with 50% women, then we should plan for 50% of our workforce to take parental leave for one point or another. But when we have inclusive parental leave policies, then we should design for 100% of our workforce that may take parental leave at some point or another. How do you make this leap?
Yeah, okay. This is very important to have a very structured modules. One of it is the very well structured time off, as we say it. Time off can be for many reasons. Can be a special occasion for any employee. So to have a time off policy, to structure very well the duties and responsibilities of the persons, to have backup plans also coming there to replace, and of course never neglect the duties and responsibilities of the people that are going to be on leave. This is very important for us. Also, the flexibility models. Now technology gives us a lot of opportunity not to disrupt business continuity and act an individualistic basis depending on the needs of the person. So might someone don't need, depending on the needs, on the psychological, on the personal needs, not need the whole of it, but needs part of it. So, or he or she can replace something with another model or more flexible model of work. So this gives us a lot of flexibility to work with the persons themselves, each by each case separately. Also, we have a shared leadership roles. For us, paternity or maternity leave cannot be only part of a person who is not a manager. On the contrary, leaders need to also take this when they become parents. So we have even part-time for some period leadership roles that are skipping are complementary to each other. Another thing is how we plan the back to work plan. This needs also a lot of planning in order for the person to be gradually integrated back to the old team. So resource planning is a very demanding and a very time-consuming and needs a lot of needs a lot of attention how we plan this. But at the end of the day, we are focusing not on the minor disruptions, but on the long-term benefits that we're going to get out of it, because we feel that people that are balanced and they're happy with their families, at the end of the day, will be happy also in the company. So this is a lot of gain, and maybe some minor distraction that will be there, but these are minor in terms of the benefits that we're going to take back. We are convinced about that.
Thank you so much. I have two very interesting questions in the chat. I think one is for Thalia and one is for Dimitris. And the first one is, these flexible work arrangements that you mentioned, can they interfere with leave? I mean, are we running the danger here to say that because you have flexible arrangements, you don't need as much leave because you can be at home and you can take care of your children, so you don't need to be officially on leave?
No, I would say not to go in this trap, because official leave and disconnection is a right, and we need to respect that, and the state give us, and maybe more from the state. I wouldn't like to mix up leave and the flexibility, but after the leave, the flexibility can be maybe let's say be closer to the kindergarten than to the office, or have this community time, which most of the time is a lost time, especially for the father or mother who is trying to pick up the little one. So I would say that flexibility is after that, if you allow me not to mix up things, because the time off, especially for a mother or the father, is very, very important. So I know that there is a lot of misunderstanding, especially after COVID, with the flexibility.
Yeah.
But no, I wouldn't like to have this mixed up.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dimitri, we have one last question, and I will read it from the chat because it's really interesting and complicated. Also, I would like to point out, says Anastasia, that in large Greek companies and organizations that are still in flexible working relationships, say μπλοκάκια or δηλωτή εργασία, and therefore employees are deprived of basic rights such as parental leave. And she goes in to ask, how do you think flexible working relationships, as well as the inability of the state mechanism to detect this phenomena, affect gender equality, and how can this be changed?
This is a very nice pass. I would like to conclude my presentation with this. Yes, there is a great clustering of various working ways in Greece, and not everyone enjoys the same rights about parenthood, maternity, and on pay, etc., etc., etc. The first step we have to do as a society is to comply with the the law on work, the labor law, especially regarding parenthood, maternity, the protection of parenthood and maternity, and the whole labor law. This is the first step. If we don't even have that, we know that, and I agree with
Anastasia.
With Anastasia that mentioned it.
Yeah.
So we need to. That's why you know that, but not everyone knows that. A very important term and condition for joining the gender equality program was for the companies to not have a sanction by a Greek court or by the ombudsman or by the labor inspectorate for the last 3 years. Now, for all this type of blokkakia and etc., I cannot answer because I work in a Greek ministry, but I can't know every aspect of the Greek Ministry for Labor. And I agree that this must end.
Okay.
Or if we have these various working relations, we should give the same rights to everyone.
We have to take those into account when designing a legal framework and providing
of course
benefits.
I mean, look at the freelancers.
Yeah.
They don't look at their maternity leaves and the rights.
What I always say is that I have had 2 children, one as an employee in a private company and one as a freelancer. In the first case, I was at home for about 5 months, and it was considered a short amount of time. And for the second time, where I was a freelancer, I stayed at home for 15 days, 2 weeks. And then I had to go back to work from home, okay, but back to work. So yeah, there's a huge difference.
The freelancers work in the United States. And,
the gig economy.
A different country.
Thank you so much for being here with us in this very interesting workshop. Thank you, Julian. You hear from us, you listen to us from afar. Thank you, all of you who submitted your questions. We will end this event with a very interesting panel discussion on how to promote women and girls in STEM fields with Penelope Theodorakakou and a host of very interesting speakers. From us, have a great afternoon. Thank you.